This is the Bat Flip Podcast. Now here's your host, Damien, David, and Matt.
What's up, everybody? This is Matt here. Welcome to another episode of the Bat Flip Podcast. I have David here with me today. Damien is out this week. So, David, how have you been doing this week?
I am doing great. Had a long day at work though, so those are pretty mid, but
I hear
overall, nice weekend. Kind of wish we could go back to that, but at the very least, baseball is around the corner, and that is what we're excited about.
Yes, it is. I've had a pretty good week, but I'm ready to talk about some baseball here. We're gonna talk a little bit today about some of the recent free agent signings and do a little factor cap episode where we talk about some things that might happen in baseball this year, decide if they're gonna happen or not gonna happen. So it should be a fun episode. Spring training is looming. In fact, next week, I believe, pitchers and catchers report. So this will be our last episode before spring training. So that's very exciting, and I can't wait to see what happens here over the next few weeks. A lot of baseball upcoming. We'll have actual games here in just a couple of weeks. So very, very cool stuff coming up soon. But David, I guess we could just jump right into it. And our first guy, I'll let you talk a second about him, but I will probably be talking more about him.
Yeah.
But last week, the Braves finally, Alex Anthopoulos has awoken from his slumber, that his hibernation of the offseason, where the Braves have done literally nothing, and he finally made his first major league signing, and it was a big one. A guy who was an all-star last year and had a real true breakout year for the Padres finally. And the Braves signed Jurickson Profar to a 3-year, $42 million deal. So, David, if you want to give a few thoughts on that, then I'll give you my spiel on it because I have a lot to say about the Braves.
Well, of course you do, right? I'll have my time later. Obviously, we're going to try to catch you guys up on the moves from, it's like a week and a half from when Profar signed up to now. A few we're just going to barely lightly touch on. This one's pretty significant though, right? 3 years, $42 million. Jurickson Profar last year was a 4-win player by WAR and put together a 139 WRC plus. Now, I would argue that's not like his true breakout. He's been a good hitter before, right? Above average, but this was the first time we've ever seen him be like a star level player. And he goes out onto the open market, makes a bank with the Braves. This is the first time he hasn't been with the Padres in a few years, except for that half season he was with Colorado in 2023, and he really struggled in Colorado, obviously. And I wonder about the inconsistency there. He's a bit of I'll call him inconsistent player. Just year to year, he seems to fluctuate a lot in terms of his production, but that's a left-handed bat that typically hits really well. He'll fit nicely into the Braves lineup at left field. I love this fit. I think it's a great move. I don't think I'm betting on Jurickson Profar to repeat, but if you can get the guy who was like a 110 WRC plus in that Braves lineup down the way, 7th, 8th hitter in the lineup, that's a massive add. It gives you a lot of Jared Kelenic, insurance. Great move for my opinion. What about you, Matt?
Yeah, I mean, I'm 100% with you on all that. I think Jurickson Profar last year was a fantastic player for the Padres. A 139 WRC plus, excellent out there. He actually had a really good 2022 as well. People don't really remember it that well because the Padres had so many key players that year. That was the year they traded for Juan Soto, and they had obviously Manny Machado there, and they that was the year they went to the World Series. You look at Profar in 2024, he started hitting the ball a little bit harder. And I don't know if people remember, but Jurickson Profar, when he came up, was the number one prospect unanimously in baseball. He was thought of as like the next middle infield like superstars. I believe he might have switch hit.
Yeah, he used to switch hit.
Yeah, he used to switch hit to start off. So that was obviously a big part of it too. But he dealt with a lot of injuries and just some inconsistency based off of that. He has had a few good years. I mean, 2018 was pretty good for him. You look at 2020 in the shortened season, he was really good for San Diego that year. So, 2023 was a disaster when he went to Colorado, which is kind of interesting because, you wouldn't think that going to Colorado would make you a disaster of a hitter. But 2024 was his breakout. He was an all-star. And the biggest thing I like for this about the Braves is the Braves over the last however long it's been since they've been on this run, so probably 7 years, they haven't had, with the exception of Ronald Acuna Jr., and Freddie Freeman before he left, they haven't had a lot of really high walk, high on base guys. Matt Olson can be that guy too,
Yeah.
but they really needed somebody who was going to be patient, put up better at bats, put up better plate appearances, walk some, and that's what Jerkson Profar is. His entire career, he has been an elite plate discipline guy. 3 out of the last 4 years, he's put up above an 11% walk rate and a sub 16% strikeout rate. And in his last year, he still put up like a 10% walk rate and a 17% strikeout rate. So this is a player who is got a very elite eye. He's going to always put up good at bats. He's going to draw his walks, get on base. So I think that's really important to remember. That's a good fit in this Braves lineup. Because one is you want guys on base for Austin Riley. You want guys on base for Matt Olson. You want guys on base for Marcelo Zuna. And when Ronald Acuna Jr. comes back, you want guys on base for him. Ozzy Albies is another low on base percentage, high slugging guy. You want guys on base for him. So they just haven't had that. They've hit a lot of solo homers, had trouble getting a lot of guys on base, putting a lot of pressure on teams this past year, especially. So I definitely think that, this is a good move for them. He fits a hole in left field where left field's been a black hole for a while for the Braves. It's been really the only weakness outside of a half season of, Jorge Soler in 2021. So, this is definitely a great signing in my opinion, and it wasn't too expensive either. $342 million. That for a guy who put up the season he put up last year, he's still only 32 years old, even though he's been in the big leagues for like 12 years. I'm pretty thrilled with it if I'm as a Braves fan, and I think most Braves fans were pretty happy with this one.
Yeah, it's shades of Ozuna, right? As much as Profar is a professional hitter kind of guy. These are the kind of Ben Zobrist slash lines that you see. He doesn't have that versatility in the field, but like, a 10% walk rate, 15% strikeout rate. That's just, a great hitter at the major league level. And I feel like this enhances a very good Braves lineup into a great Braves lineup, presuming obviously the health and effectiveness of those guys coming back from injury. And we'll talk about more about the Braves later, I'm sure, but I like this move. I know you do too. I wanted to note that the Nats in the NL East signed Shinosuke Ogasawara to a 2-year, $3.5 million deal. Feel like Ogasawara is going to get some run in the Nats rotation. I don't know that there's a Shota Imanaga upside to this guy, but he is interesting. And so I wanted to toss him out there. I know you said you don't know a whole lot about him. What do you think, Matt, about Dylan Carlson going to the Orioles after they signed Tyler O'Neill? So they're just going with all the old Cardinals outfielders.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I mean, Dylan Carlson was at one time a high-end prospect for the Cardinals. He's had some good seasons, or at least like he's shown a little bit of promise at the big league level. I mean, it's not like he's just been an absolute awful bust his entire career. I mean, in 2021, he had a pretty good year, put up 2.5 wins above replacement. He's still really young. He's only 26 years old. Last year was pretty bad, but there's probably something there. And signing him to a very cheap deal, he could play all the outfield positions. Signing him to a really cheap deal, I don't think is a bad decision for the Orioles. And it just adds more, like it adds insurance, because I think the Orioles really want their young guys to be the key here. They want their young guys to take off this year and to take over those positions. But if they all struggle, which is a possibility, that Kowser's not that great this year, and Kerstad, and all this long list of guys who are in the Orioles farm system. You've got a guy like Dylan Carlson and Tyler O'Neill you mentioned as well, that are, they've been around and they have talent. So you might figure it out with one of those guys too.
Yeah, I don't have a ton on Carlson. I just thought he'd be a fun one to note that happened, because that's something where, halfway through the year, you could be like, whoa, Dylan Carlson has 2 wins above replacement. When did that happen? When did that move even occur? Well, you heard it here first. Dylan Carlson's an Oriole.
So, but yeah, moving on. Our next one we've got on the list is actually a trade. And David will have more to say about this one, but I have a couple little thoughts on it. Ryan Presley got traded from the Houston Astros to the Chicago Cubs. Definitely a very interesting trade, in my opinion. this is one that, and I'll let David gloat about it a little bit here, but he brought it up at the beginning of last year
Yeah.
that this would be a good fit, and I agree. I mean, the Cubs really needed a back end of the bullpen guy, um, and that's something they missed last year. It really cost them a shot at the playoffs last year,
Mm-hmm.
not going hard on their bullpen, and I thought that their front office signed some guys that were. We've talked a lot about Hector Neris last year. I made fun of him a lot, and that was not a good signing. And I think that the Cubs front office thought he was going to be pretty good for them and be that guy. So Ryan Presley, though, is a really solid pitcher. He is 30, about to turn 36.
Mm-hmm.
I have a few concerns about him. Last year his velocity was down, and he wasn't quite the same effectiveness as he had been for a couple years with Houston, but there's some argument to be made. I think he dealt with an injury for a little while.
Mm-hmm.
There's some argument to be
Yep.
made. Pulling him out of the closer role for Josh Hader might have affected him some. I think that's really ultimately why he decided to take his no trade clause away and go elsewhere so he could close. So I like it for the Cubs. I mean, they didn't really have to give up too much, and I think that Ryan Presley is. It's kind of a luxury for the Astros, who are really kind of trying to save some money right now, trying to
Mhm.
bring back Bregman now. So I definitely think that this was a good move for the Cubs. But David, what are your overall thoughts on it?
Yeah, I mean, I like you said, I like it. I will say this would have felt a lot better if you were bringing Ryan Presley in after you got Tanner Scott. That was my, I feel very much like I'm like, yeah, okay, this is nice, right? It's not as good as it could have been, but looking at, and we're gonna hit on a couple more relievers here. This is my favorite reliever option, I think, of the group that we're going to talk about today. And Presley's still got, you mentioned the velocity being down. I do think that's a concern. But Presley's still got two off-speed offerings, the curveball and the slider, that whiff at, like, he gets like 30% whiff on both. Yeah, if you're looking at like the StatCast sliders and stuff, I mean, these are two like elite pitches. And the Cubs have had really good success in taking relievers with great pitches and making those pitches better, right? And getting more out of the reliever. And that was, I think, the problem with Hector Neris was he was a splitter guy, but the splitter is a volatile pitch that's not very repeatable. And they knew that because Mark Leiter had that same problem where if Mark Leiter was on, the splitter was on, great pitcher. Neris, same problems. And I saw the comparison, right? Older reliever coming to the Cubs from the Astros. The comparison is very there between Nick Presley and Neris,
Yeah.
but I do think the difference is Presley's got that repeatable curveball slider arsenal that where if you do lose a tick on the fastball, you're still going to get those whiffs and get those strikeouts in the bullpen. And Presley should be able to get comfortable in the bullpen, close those games, and help the Cubs.
Yeah, and
All right, now you go.
One more little thing about what you were just saying with Presley and Neris, that comparison. I don't know if I said it right. I don't want to compare those two because when Hector Neris came over, his metrics were awful his last year in Houston. Like he had like a 5 fielding independent pitching, and Presley was still pretty good last year. In fact, I think he had like I think I had it pulled up a minute ago, but I think it was like a 310, which is pretty good still, despite having a bad start. So Presley's still good. He was good last year. The ERA was a little bit higher than that, but it wasn't crazy, and that's part of the volatility we talk about. So I don't think it's a total 1-for-1 for comparison, just because Hector Neris coming over, he had a good ERA, but his stuff was just not there that last year with the Astros either. So that's why I gave him so much crit flack for that signing. But moving on, we've got another signing that this might be the most interesting one we're going to talk about. Ha-Seong Kim signed with the Tampa Bay Rays, believe it or not, on a 2-year, $29 million deal. I believe that second year is a player option, if I'm not mistaken. And that's a big point here because Ha-Seong Kim is he's injured and he will not start the season at the big league in the big leagues. He'll be on the injured list to start the season. I believe he's targeting us sometime in May, if I'm not mistaken. So it's not out a super long time. But definitely an interesting signing there. Ha-Seong Kim sneakily has had a really good career so far. He's put up over 11 WAR in his 4 major league seasons, or about 11 WAR in his 4 major league seasons, despite having a really rough rookie season in 2021. The last 3 years, his lowest WAR in a season was 2.6. He's been an above-average hitter the last 3 years. The average is kind of low, but he's pretty good at getting on base. We talked about with Jerks and Profar, the walk rate being 11%. Well, the last 2 seasons, Hassan Kim's walk rate has been over 12%, which is really, really good. And the strikeout rate's been really solid. He does not get on. He doesn't hit for a high average just because he doesn't. His batting average on balls and plays typically pretty low. I don't think he hits the ball particularly hard. I haven't literally looked at his baseball savant
he
page
doesn't.
much, but he's kind of a plate discipline, soft, bat but he's a really good defender. And I think the biggest question with Hassan Kim is that shoulder. If that shoulder is 100%, then Hassan Kim could have a really good year for Tampa Bay, and he could be, Tampa's probably not going to be a contender this year. I say probably because you just never know with that franchise when they might end up just out of nowhere being really good, but they're probably not going to be there this year. He could be a trade deadline type guy, and the player option does complicate that a little bit, but trade deadline type guy, somebody who has a really good year and then goes back into free agency next year, gets a big deal. So it's definitely someone to kind of look out for. And you never know. Like I said, with the Rays, they've got some talented players, young guys on their roster. They got a good farm system. You never know. They might have a good year. But, definitely an interesting signing. And we'll see what happens with Hassan Kim. David, what do you think about this?
You covered it, right? I mean, the injury is the big key, but I mean, he stole 38 bases in 2023. This is a guy with a lot of upside in the field and in your lineup in general as a kind of a do-it-all type of player where, he can hit ninth, he can hit second, he can kind of be everything that you need him to be. He can also play multiple spots. He can play shortstop, second base, third base, like versatile. Walks a lot. This is a great baseball player to have. Very good Rays fit. They need a shortstop. We've talked about that situation, right? So Hassan Kim probably going to play shortstop for the Rays this year. He'll move. You've got Caminero probably at third base for them. It's Brandon Lau probably plays second for them, I guess. So he'll have to, I think, carry the load a little bit defensively. But that's something he can do. He's very, very strong defensively. He's had a lot of, he's got a lot of that defensive WAR that, I think makes him a valuable player. And that makes this kind of an exciting move, but it does beg the question, how does that shoulder impact the defense? Can he play shortstop at the same level that he played it beforehand? I would assume yes, but that is a concern. That's why Hassan Kim was on the market this long, and then also going for this kind of cheaper rate with the kind of effective 1-year deal, because this is a pretty good player. You're a 3-4 WAR guy. He's getting the same as Profar, he was a 2 WAR guy at most before last year. I feel pretty strongly that Kim would be considered the better player on the market if healthy, but he was not healthy.
Exactly. Moving on, another signing here. We're kind of in that portion of the offseason where you have a lot of mid-tier free agents signing because a lot of the big guys are off the market. We are still waiting on Bregman, but another mid-tier guy, I think at the time he signed, he was the top reliever left on the market, at least on the free agent market. I'm not 100% sure about that.
Yeah.
I might be leaving somebody out.
David Robertson's the other one still out there.
Yeah, and I would think that this guy's probably better just because of the age thing with David Robertson. But Carlos Estevez is the player that we are talking about, and he signed a 2-year deal for $22 million with the Kansas City Royals. So definitely an interesting deal here. I'll let David talk a little bit more about this one because David is a big fan of this guy, I believe.
Yeah.
So, or at least you were last year.
Yeah, it's one of those where Carlos Estevez is the guy I called that he would improve exiting Colorado.
Yeah.
And he did. And it's one of those where he's been a lot better since leaving Colorado. He was good with the Angels, but he moved over to Philly and he struggled a little bit. He struggled. The walks went up, the strikeouts went down. He was not as effective in Philadelphia, and that's the reason I think that this deal isn't a little more lucrative. The Royals maybe just a little bit apprehensive, and then also on top of that, the Royals have invested into their bullpen a decent amount of late with guys like James McArthur and Lucas Erceg. Estevez just cements this bullpen as a good bullpen in that AL Central. I think it's probably the second best bullpen in the Central at this point, given that, you've got Cleveland with their just great group where they were able to trade Eli Morgan out of it and it didn't get any worse. Right. So Cleveland's obviously got the nail on that, and Griffin Jackson, Joan Duran are carrying a kind of a bad Minnesota bullpen. So this I think elevates Kansas City above that group. But, Estevez is solid, right? He throws 97 still. He's got good off speeds, but I would say this is a decent commitment, right? 2 years for 11 a year for a reliever. That's a decent chunk, especially for a guy who was not good down the stretch last year and has in the past struggled with giving up the home run ball, right? Since leaving Colorado, his home runs have really taken a nosedive, and that's effectively allowed Carlos Estevez to be a much more effective reliever. But if those home runs start to raise again in Kansas City, it's not what you want. But Kansas City isn't an easy ballpark to hit home runs in. I feel like Estevez is going to fit well. I like the signing. Who's going to be closer there is kind of a fun question. We'll get back to that later, though.
Yeah, that is a good one. And I'll just expand a little bit. I thought his splits last year were very interesting after the trade. You mentioned the strikeouts came down, the walks actually over doubled after the trade. Now it was only 21 innings, so it's small sample size. I'd probably take the full season sample just because guys have a cold stretch in their season, and it just happened to be after the trade. But the interesting thing to me is that while those strikeout plate discipline numbers changed the way they did, his walk rate, his ground ball rate almost doubled too, which is really interesting because he had a very low ground ball rate in Los Angeles with the Angels, where, he had a 287 FIP, but his xFIP was really high because of the he just had a low home run per fly ball rate. He was giving up a lot of hard hit fly balls that just weren't getting out of the park. And when he went to Philly, Philly is a bandbox sometimes. I think he might have adjusted some things to try to get the ball on the ground a little bit more worried about those fly balls, and that might be part of the change in his plate discipline numbers too. Maybe throwing more. I haven't seen the numbers on it, but maybe throw more sinkers or something that are a little bit different. But yeah, I like the signing for Kansas City. And you mentioned the bullpen there is. They've got two really good guys back into that bullpen, and I don't know that they have an elite guy. I know you really like Lucas Erceg, and I think he's really good, but I don't know if I'd consider him an elite guy yet. But they have two or three really good relievers back there that are going to be difficult in late games. So it feels a little bit like their 2015, 2016 or 2014-15. That
I don't know about all that. I don't know about all that yet, but
no, yeah, but they're building their team that way a little bit.
Right.
So, moving on, a couple more relievers here. Tommy Kahnle signed for the Tigers on a 1-year deal. Ryan Stanek signed a 1-year deal with the Mets. I don't have a ton of thoughts on those. Those guys to me are kind of middle relievers. They have the capability of being good, but they're a little inconsistent. Maybe not, your top and back end of the bullpen types. But David, do you have any thoughts on any of those guys? Either one of those guys?
Very briefly, Tommy Kahnle's changeup was one of the best pitches in baseball last year. It was. It was very good. And I was talking about Ryan Presley's like 30%. Tommy Kahnle's changeup was up there in that same tier. So interesting little get for the Tigers. I assume Kahnle will assume duties in the 7th or 8th inning in front of Foley and Lange. But that does give the Tigers a bit more, of a pulse in the bullpen. But overall, Tommy Kahnle to the Tigers is good. Stanek to the Mets is pretty, it's a fine move for them. And I don't have anything beyond that. That was just kind of the two guys that are in there.
Yeah. So moving on, our next guy here is another reliever. A lot of relievers coming off the board. Kirby Yates signed a 1-year, $13 million deal with the Los Angeles Dodgers. So Kirby Yates last year was really good.
Mhm.
He's 38 years old, and he had come off 3 years of massive amounts of injuries. He pitched 4 innings in 2020 and 7 innings in 2022. He did not pitch in 2021, so he had come off of basically 3 entire seasons without pitching. And then in 2023, he pitched for the Braves and he was okay. Like his metrics were pretty bad. His ERA wasn't terrible. A lot of walk issues, home run issues. 2024 though looked like Kirby Yates did when he was with the 2019 San Diego Padres and was the best reliever in
Mhm.
baseball. I mean, he was really good last year. Now the metrics were a little bit elevated over his ERA, but he was still excellent. The whiffs were up. He cut the walks back down, got the ball on the ground a lot more. The home run ball, which had been a huge issue for him in Atlanta, was back under control. He had a fantastic he had a fantastic uh he had a fantastic 2023 or
Yeah.
2024. So David, do you think that he is able to repeat 2024, or do you think we're going to get the injured and ineffective Kirby Yates we saw for the previous 4 years before that?
I'll totally drop out on this, and I'll say somewhere in between, right? I'm not worried about the injury per se. I think those are behind him, and it has reduced effectively the mileage on his arm. But the good thing for Kirby Yates is he's stepping into the perfect situation, right? I mean, and this is kind of the crux of, I think, all of our problem with the Dodgers is that they're willing to spend the money, and then it just puts you on the best spot, the best team in baseball, right? It's, Kirby Yates doesn't have to close. He doesn't have to pitch every day. He's not someone that the Dodgers are going to rely on in the bullpen, right? He's a third, fourth option out of the bullpen, but he gets to go into a really competitive situation and throw meaningful innings. I don't anticipate he has another 117 ERA. That is a little bonkers, and I don't think
Yeah,
I was
that's not
aware that he
happening.
was that good. That was like, I don't, we're gonna do the factor cap thing in a little bit. I'm like, yeah, cap on this, this season repeating, obviously, but like the fact that Kirby Yates is back to being a good reliever and the Dodgers giving him money is a very obvious indication of that. So somewhere in between, I think maybe the Braves version, but with the metrics meeting the 328 ERA feels like a pretty reasonable expectation for a Kirby Yates here. And, I think he'll get breaks, right? I think he'll be able to take some time to rest. He might only need to throw 50 innings, but if he throws 50 really effective innings with the Dodgers, then that's all they need. And he'll be one of their, big three in the bullpen, going into the playoffs. So I think that's pretty cut and dry, but any final thoughts on that?
I don't think so. I think
Yeah.
I don't have a ton of confidence that Kirby Yates is going to repeat his year last year. I think he's going to be somewhere in that like 4
Yeah.
ERA range. I don't think he'll repeat what he did with Atlanta in 2023 either. He's 38 years old too. You got to remember that. So, but it'll be interesting to see. I definitely think it was worth a try, especially for the Dodgers who have unlimited money. So, um,
I guess maybe my final thought is, I guess the age I'm not worried about. And I mentioned David Robertson earlier. He's 40 and he just had his best season of his career last year with the Rangers. I don't know what the Rangers were cooking. I just feel like, age at this point for relievers, as long as their stuff is still there, they're gonna be good. Like a reliever, the mentality is something that you have over the course of time. Like veterans acquire the experience to be able to go out there day in and day out and do these, have their rhythm and stuff. And relievers, you can just trust a good reliever to always be good until they're not. And I don't think that has nosedive is hit for Kirby Yates yet, especially because he's kind of risen back up. I mean, we've seen a lot of these older guys recently drop down. So, or not drop off as they hit 40 and 41. We're not seeing it yet. So,
yep. So, Damien is in the chat just spamming talk about Luca. So, I mean,
no,
I don't really care because it's basketball and baseball's better. But we are talking about some trades. So the baseball equivalent of Luca would be like Fernando Tatis getting traded for Mike Trout or something. So there you go. We talked about Luca. You happy, Damien? But moving on to an actual trade, the Mavs are as cooked as the Cubs, says Adam. So there you go.
Not wrong.
Yeah, true. But moving on to a baseball trade, which is the real trades.
Right.
We had another reliever get traded. Taylor Rogers got moved from the San Francisco Giants to the Cincinnati Reds. Taylor Rogers has been a pretty solid reliever for a while. He had a 2.40 ERA last year, which is really good.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like it's a good fit. The Reds
Mm-hmm.
really need a lefty reliever. They've got Alexis Diaz to close out games. He was a little shaky last year, but they really just need to add pitching, and getting a reliever with the caliber and consistency of Taylor Rogers is really solid for them. And one thing I really like about this one, and then I'll let David talk, is his ground ball rate. Cincinnati is a home run ballpark, and the ground ball rate was 46% last year. It's always been, in the upper 40s. So that's good to get guys who get the ball on the ground in Cincinnati.
Yeah, it's a good move for the Reds. Good move. They need to increase the potency of that bullpen. So no issues with this move. It's annoying, and that's a good thing for the Reds. They need to be opportunistic in taking good players off of other teams and that are trying to move them. And this does separate the Rogers brothers. So how much of those superpowers from the two brothers being on the same team gets removed. But yeah, don't have much beyond that. This is a good move for them, and he fits the ballpark nicely, like Matt said. So.
Yes, absolutely. So our next guy to talk about, I promise we're getting close to being done here. The next guy to talk about here is Jorge Polanco, who re-signed with the kind of surprisingly with the Mariners after he struggled there last year. 1 year, $7.5 million or $7.75 million. He has a player option for 2026 and for $6 million with some incentives. So this is an interesting one for me. Jorge Polanco had a really bad year last year. It was the worst year of his career. He put up 0.3 WAR on the season. Was a below average hitter for the first time in his career, with the exception of the shortened 2020 season. I guess he had a below average season in 2017 at the plate as well. But this is somebody who's typically a 115, 120 WRC plus guy who can play the middle infield to some form of an acceptable level, especially at second base. Jorge Polanco was a player that we were really thinking we really didn't like this move last year for the Twins when they traded him, and it ended up looking like a really good move. So, David, what are your thoughts on Jorge Polanco and signing the deal with the Mariners?
Yeah, I don't get this one. Why go back to a place that you struggled with? I guess seeing the ball. His strikeout rate in his last 2 seasons is ballooned by 10%. Right, went up from 20% to 30%. This is a guy that he can't afford to be striking out that much. He doesn't hit the ball hard enough. He doesn't hit enough home runs. Right, unless you're the 2021 version. But that was when he was 27 years old. He's now over 30. This feels like the move to get the most money in the starting job for 1 more year, but this is I think this is a bad move for future paydays for Jorge Polanco. I think he needed to step back and go take a bench role effectively to prove that the strikeout rate wasn't a him problem and it was more of a ballpark problem and a situation problem. This is just going to double down that he's putting himself in a bad situation, and then that this also pains the Mariners, right? You're going to spend $8 million on this guy. Well, you could have spent 20 something million on Alex Bregman, right, and gotten a third baseman that can hit. I'm not convinced Polanco can hit. The problem is the Mariners can't draw any free agents to their park, so they have to go get the guys who are willing to play there. This is just a kind of a bad situation all around. I don't like this move, and I don't like this move for Polanco. I don't like this move for the Mariners because I feel like he's going to be bad. It's not a good move overall.
Yeah. One last note on Jorge Polanco. We'll move on. First half, 71 WRC plus. Second half, 114. And I think that might be part of the call here. He was back to his normal self in the second half after just being awful in the first half. So we'll see if that's able to continue. A couple more guys here.
Do you have the strikeout rate? I guess that's my only last
I
thing.
do. It went from 33% to 26%.
That's still,
so it dropped. It's still high, but it dropped by a lot.
It did drop. Okay.
So Moving on, just a couple more guys to talk about. We'll talk briefly about Michael King. He had a great year last year. He's of winning arb, and he signed a deal with the Padres to be back this year. He also got an option year. It's kind of the big deal
Yep.
there. So 1 year extension for a reliever for a starter, reliever turned starter, who had a very good 2024 as a starter, and the Padres really need to keep some guys around because it's the payroll's getting tight there, and definitely good for them to keep him around. Max
Worth
Scherzer,
noting before we go to Scherzer,
yeah,
the thing about King, I put this on here because I just don't think King gets traded now.
no,
I
I don't
think
either.
you look at the Padres situation; they are going to move some payroll. It's a matter of who,
Yeah,
not and when, not
I think it
if.
might be Cease now.
Right, and I think this kind of leans it into you have to move Cease or Arias and Suarez. Right, you
Yeah,
can't move King anymore and get a big haul and just kind of roll back the team. I think you have to move something, and this makes me believe it'll be Cease.
yeah, I'm with you on that. So moving on, I was about to mention him,
Mm-hmm.
and we have Max Scherzer. He signed a 1 year, $15.5 million deal with the Blue Jays.
Mm-hmm.
So Max Scherzer, very, very, very interesting case here because of the age and because he hasn't quite been the same effectiveness the last couple of years, but he hasn't been terrible.
No,
So does he have 1 more year left in him? What do you think, David?
I think he does. You know, if he can give him 100 120 good innings, that's a good signing, right? Like Max Scherzer, and he's a guy who he's a bulldog. He'll go out there and give you what he's got at 40 years old. It might not be as much as he used to have, right? This isn't the guy who was winning Cy Youngs, right, a few years back, but this is still a good pitcher. I think this is a very fine move, especially for 15 million. Somebody finally took the Blue Jays money, right? But Scherzer's going to get a chance in the rotation. The Blue Jays are desperate, and if the Blue Jays need to sell off in the middle of the season, well, we've seen Scherzer's very, very obviously available for trade. He's been available for trade like each of the last 3 deadlines. So this is just a great move. Hopefully, Scherzer stays healthy and give us one more good season in that Hall of Fame career.
Yeah, no doubt. I'm with you. I think he's might have it left, but it's just hard to tell because he didn't pitch much last year. So,
Mm-hmm.
if he's healthy, then I could see him being an upper threes ERA guy who is a mid rotation number 4 starter with that brings a lot of leadership. So that would be worth the
Mm-hmm.
15 million. Now I could also see a scenario where he's just cooked and doesn't
Yeah.
really that make it past June and on the roster. So that'll be interesting to see. Also, a possible trade candidate if the Blue Jays fall out of it. Although they have made enough moves recently to think that they might be in it later in the season. Last guy on our free agency list is Jack Flaherty. He signed with the Detroit Tigers, which is where he started the season last year. 2 years, $35 million. He has an opt out after the first year, but if he comes back, it could be 2 years, $45 million.
Yeah.
So Jack Flaherty is a pitcher who was incredibly good in 2019 with the Cardinals. Then he dealt with injuries and ineffectiveness and all kinds of stuff. Walks, got a case of the tons of walks. But then in 2024, when he went to the Tigers, he absolutely was one of the best pitchers in baseball for
Mm-hmm.
his entire time he was with the Tigers. In 106 innings, he had a 2.95 ERA. The metrics backed it up. His strikeout rate was insane. He cut his walk rate below 2. Fantastic. The
Mm-hmm.
Dodgers, when he went there, it wasn't quite as good. It was still pretty good. He got a 3.58 ERA. The walks over doubled or almost
Yeah.
doubled. The strikeouts weren't quite as good. His metrics were okay. But are we going to get first half Jack Flaherty? Are we going to get second half Jack Flaherty with the Dodgers, or you know, are we going to get injured Jack Flaherty? That's the big question too, because I think that might be part of why his contract is where it is.
Yeah. This contract reeks of teams that have either discussed with him or the physical that he is taking with the Tigers being pretty negative. I think it's his back that is the problem, the injury risk here, and backs you can't mess around with, right? If your back is bad, you're just not going to be effective. So for Jack Flaherty, who is a pitcher that relies on some velocity, throws like 95, right? Like this is a pitcher that you need to be healthy. The risk is that he is not, and the Tigers are accepting that risk because they need a guy to pitch in there with Tariq Skubal. Skubal liked this deal, right? He sent a gif of them being like, "Oh, we're back, let's go." And I think if Skubal likes it, I like it, but the risk is heavy with this one because the Tigers need a starter of the caliber of Flaherty, but they need the starter that Flaherty was. And if he's unable to perform at that same level and is hurt and is pitching through injury, you're going to get probably the Dodgers version or worse. So this is scary, but it's the kind of necessary risk that a team like the Tigers needs to take right here.
Absolutely. So I guess moving on to our next segment, we're going to have a quick little game here we're going to play. We're going to play a game called Factor Cap. So it's kind of a true or false game. And we're going to have, I believe we've got 8 topics we're going to talk about real quick. And we're going to decide if we think this is going to happen or not going to happen. So I guess I'll let, we can start off with this first one. David, Factor Cap. A player will steal 70 bases in 2025.
So my goal for this game is I'll give my answer, and then I'm going to give the players that I think will do it, or if it's going to be like a so-and-so player is going to win so-and-so award, I need to give the challengers if I believe that the player will win the award, right? So for this, 70 stolen bases was my thought. I'm saying we didn't see it last year, right? We saw it with Ronald Acuna 2 years ago with the new rules. I'm saying fact, we're going to get a 70 stolen base guy, but it's not going to be Ellie De La Cruz, right? That's my key on this. It will not be Ellie. It's going to be Pete Crow Armstrong.
Interesting.
Steal 70 bases. That's my guy here. I
Yeah.
think I keep seeing him having like 30 steals on the projections, and I'm like, he stole 30 last year in like 100 games, and he wasn't even running in September. Like once the Cubs were kind of out of it, he just quit running. I think he's going to steal 70 or 80. He's just going to have a crazy stolen base season. That's my guy.
Yeah. I wonder if Pete Crow Armstrong's get on base enough for it.
That's a great point.
Because
he
I
needs
think
to be on base.
That's going to be the issue for me. I mean, I think he's got the speed to where he could do it if he had a 330, 340 on base, but that's going to be difficult. I think we definitely have a chance of getting this. I think Ellie De La Cruz is got to be the top of the list for me. I mean, Shohei Ohtani stole 59. Now with him pitching this year, he might not run quite as much. Bryce Terang stole 50, but I just don't see him putting up the same type of thing as he did last year. One sneaky guy to look out for. Nobody's really talked about him as much. Corbin Carroll. He's a speedster.
Ooh, yeah.
He had a bit of a rough year to start last year. He had some shoulder issues. He maybe kind of didn't run quite as much because of that. Trying to making sure he doesn't get injured further, although it wouldn't have really affected his effectiveness on the base paths. Corbin Carroll's a guy to kind of look out for that. And you never know, there could be somebody that kind of comes out of nowhere on that. I mean, there's a bunch of speed guys who could just put up one season where they get on base a lot with a high BABIP and end up stealing a ton of bases. And, it's worth mentioning the guy who's done this recently. But, Ronald Acuna Jr. is not likely to come back till May, and I don't see him doing it with missing a month. So, we'll see maybe in 2026 for him if he's back fully 100% healthy on that knee. Maybe you could look out for him, but I don't think this is going to be the year for that. So I guess we'll move on to the next one. The next one is Factor Cap. A player will go for a 40-40 season again.
Right. So, another stolen base adjacent one, but this one with the power aspect. We saw it with Shohei Ohtani last year. He would be the obvious candidate. I'm going to say fact, it's Jose Ramirez that gets it. Jose Ramirez or Kyle Tucker. Those would be my two, I think, favorite options because Tucker was one stolen base off 30-30. There's another guy down here that Uncle Ted tossed one in. Gunnar Henderson could totally do it. He could definitely be a 40-40 guy. Yep. Maybe Bobby Witt hits 10 more home runs too.
Yeah.
So those are my guys. I think we do see a 40-40 though, but the guy that needs to do it is the guy who was one home run off last year, and that was Jose Ramirez.
Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, I think it has to start with Shohei Ohtani. I believe he's actually projected for 40-40 right now by Zips, which
Her
hopefully
projections
it's
are conservative.
I was gonna say,
That's ridiculous.
which hopefully is not a curse
Oh my
because
gosh.
Ronald Acuna was projected for 40-40 last year and got hurt. So hopefully it's
Right.
not a curse.
Well,
Um,
I think what you
but
mentioned, Otani's not going to run as much. He's going to pitch.
probably not. And but I mean, he stole 59 last year, so
He
he
can. He
doesn't
can
run as
totally.
much. Well, he might steal 20 fewer bases and still do it, basically. Like, um, but but yeah, I think there's a pretty good chance this happens. The modern game with the home run ball being so many guys hitting 40 home runs, plus now you've got the new rules that allow the stolen bases to be back. Somebody's going to do this. It could be Ellie too. We mentioned him with
Yeah.
70 stolen bases. I mean, he's got the 40 home run power easy in there. It's just a matter of t- contacting the ball some, so
And elevating it. Yeah.
and elevating it. So that'll be interesting to look out for this year. Something that hasn't been done very many times in baseball, but we could have a third straight year of it. So factor cap, a player will hit 10 WAR for the second year in a row. This is not a very common feat over the last 20 years in baseball, but last year we had two players go for 10 WAR, Aaron
Was it?
Judge and Bobby Witt Jr.
Yeah.
And then before that, you had Shohei Otani. I think he was short of 10 WAR in 2023 because of the pitching injury.
Yeah.
So I think he got just short of 10 WAR. He may have gotten 10 WAR though that year,
He
in
was
which case it would
close.
be 4 years in a row. But either way, will a player hit 10 WAR this year? David, what do you think?
We've seen some guys really figure out how to accumulate WAR, right? Aaron Judge put together a 200 WRC plus season last year, got 10 WAR. Bobby Witt Jr. parlayed at what a 340 on base percentage and great shortstop defense into 10 WAR. I just, I think we have too many talented and incredible players to not have it happen. But logic to me, especially with Otani pitching, where he may not play as many games offensively, my thought is no cap here. But you mentioned the guys, right? Those are the list of candidates is the group. It's the most talented players in our game: Bobby Witt, Judge, Otani. Somebody could pop off and go get close to it. Gunnar Henderson is a great option for that. I don't know that I see it happening. No, 10 WAR is a crazy good season. There's only been like 30 of those in baseball history.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. I'm gonna go with
It's probably more than
no.
30.
Yeah, I'm gonna go with no on this one as well. I'm gonna go with the cap, but I think that is for me a Shohei Otani. Probably won't be fully back on the mound yet.
Mhm.
Um, I could see him putting up something like 7 WAR at the plate, 6 WAR at the plate as a DH, and then 2 WAR as a pitcher this year while he's kind of working his way back from the Tommy John surgery. So I don't know that he'll get the 10 WAR, but I think Bobby Witt's definitely the candidate here, and Aaron Judge too. It's hard to bet against Aaron Judge with
Mhm.
what he's done the last 3 years. He's excellent, and I would say Gunnar Henderson's another option here. He's
Yep.
also a very
Yep.
good shortstop defender or solid shortstop defender who can put up a huge stat line at the plate. So that's
Yeah,
definitely another option you could look at.
Gunnar had 8 WAR last year.
Yeah, he did.
We didn't mention Juan Soto. 8 WAR for Juan Soto too last year.
Yeah,
Those are that's your crew, right? Of guys who can make a run at this.
yeah,
Gunnar probably just needs to play a little bit better defense. Like he just wasn't as good defensively as Bobby Witt or
yeah,
Francisco Lindor. If he if he pushes up the stolen bases, gets more base running value, and plays just a little bit better defense at shortstop, he gets there. I think with a
yeah.
similar season.
Yeah, and I think that, you mentioned Gunnar Henderson. I think Juan Soto's upside of the 10 WAR is just a little bit limited because of the defense and base running.
Right.
I just don't know. I think he's going to be a consistent 6 to 8 WAR player. I don't know if he's ever going to put up like 10 or 11 WAR. He'd have to have an insane year because last year he put up a 180 WRC plus and only had 8 WAR. So he'd have to put up a well over 200, and I just don't know if that's going to happen. I mean, that's extremely rare. We've only seen that a few times, and Aaron
Barry
Judge
Bonds and
is really
Aaron
the only.
Judge.
Yeah, I mean Barry
That's it.
Bonds and Aaron Judge are really the only ones that have done that
Yeah.
in the last 30 years. So definitely an interesting one there. But we'll see if it happens. So I guess we'll move into a couple of team ones here.
Mhm.
The first one is there's a team out there in the Houston Astros who have not missed the playoffs in 8 years. I think the last time they missed was 2016. So I guess it's been 9 years. Um, And the Houston Astros have lost some of their core now. Some of their core is aging, like Altuve. If they bring back Bregman, he's aging a little bit. So do the Astros make the playoffs because their division's gotten better? The AL in general's gotten better. The Central's got more teams that are wild card contenders now. The East is still good. The West has gotten a little bit better. Do the Astros make the playoffs?
It's got to happen at some point that they don't. I don't really trust their pitching staff. I don't think
either.
that Framber is still really good. He's still an ace. Beyond Framber, and I guess is Verlander still there? I think he is. No, he's not. No, Verlander went to the Giants.
Yep.
Like Hunter Brown, you're expecting Hunter Brown to take a step forward. I don't know if I trust him. I don't trust Ronald Blanco to push it in, but yeah, I mean, like Adam said, right? The Astros always make it happen. So I think I'm going to say fact, or rather cap, they're going to make it the playoffs, right? That'll be my answer. Is the Astros going to find a way? Jordan might be one of those guys who puts up one of the crazy seasons, a 10-WAR season from DH, 200 WRC plus. I've been waiting for him to do that, right? 50, 60 home runs, something like that. He just hasn't done it yet. So it could be this year, right? And if they go out and get Bregman back, I think I'd pencil him in as the favorite for the AL West. It's just, until Bregman signs, it's definitely up in the air, and that's the big question for me is can the Astros compensate for the loss of Tucker, the loss of Presley, the other players, Bregman potentially walking? Can they compensate with Paredes and Josh Hader in the bullpen, and they haven't made any other signings, right? They're trying to balance the budget and the keeping this playoff streak alive. It will bite them. They will miss the playoffs here shortly. I don't think it's this year though.
I've gone back and forth on this one. I'm gonna say fact that they missed the playoffs because they're bound to at some point, and I just don't know. I like you said, I think they've got a couple good pitchers, but I just don't trust it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't trust their bullpen either. I mean, Ryan Presley's gone. Hader is hit or miss right now. I mean, he's still got the stuff, but we'll talk about him here in a minute. But I just don't know. The Rangers are going to be a lot better than they were last year because they're going to be healthier, at least to start the season. I think the Mariners are going to be similar to what they were last year, which is a good team. I mean, they only missed the playoffs by a couple games. I think the A's have gotten a little bit better. I don't think they're going to make the playoffs, but they could be a little bit peskier and kind of keep the Astros from being able to get a wild card if they don't win this division.
Or
those 2 or 3 wins that the A's might have gained on them. So I think this is definitely a season that the Astros could miss, and just losing this core is, starting to take a toll on them, especially with the fact that their farm system has been really weak for a while. But as Uncle Ted there says, betting against the Astros really is a horrible bet. So it's kind of like betting on the Angels. It feels like every year they're it's gonna be different, and then it's not. So
right.
But moving on, the next one we've got here, the Los Angeles Dodgers win the World Series.
Cap.
I'm with you.
I will not elaborate further.
I will briefly. I think the Dodgers are definitely the team to beat, but it is baseball, and it is a very random sport where the best team very rarely wins. The best team on paper very rarely wins. So I think if you have a 1 in 5 chance of winning the World Series, if you're the best team in baseball any given year, and when you get a short series, it could change. So I would say that there's a 70% chance that the Dodgers don't win the World Series and a 30% chance they do, which is absolutely astronomically insane that there's a 30% chance before the season that the Dodgers will win, but that leaves a much higher chance that they don't win. So there you go. That's why I'm going to say cap, and I'll probably be wrong because they're the Dodgers and they're going to find a way to win. But
I am a grade A hater of the Dodgers. I will be known as a hater of the Dodgers all season long. I hope nothing but bad things for the Dodgers and their fans, especially.
Yeah,
actually, just one in particular. But the bottom line there is right. Matt said it. Baseball's random. It's gonna be. They barely won the World Series last year, right? They're scrounging together bullpen games in the World Series. They were not guaranteed to win the World Series last year throughout the playoffs, and were a good game from San Diego away from being bounced. Yep. So I'm not going to bet on them. I would probably say bet on them, right? But that's not a guarantee. And I feel very confident that baseball going to baseball. All you got to do is get in the postseason, and then the best team in terms of wins, which I think the Dodgers next year will hunt down, is the 2001 Mariners. The 2001 Mariners got bounced in the playoffs, right, before they even made the championship series, right? So they didn't win the World Series. The best team in the 20th century didn't win the 21st century didn't win the World Series. So this Dodgers team might break that record, but that's no guarantee that you get in there and win the World Series. So, cap for me.
All right. 3 more. The next one is the best player by WAR in the National League East is not Juan Soto. Factor cap.
Yeah, I'm gonna say fact on this. I made this question. I didn't know how I was gonna answer it. I'm gonna say fact on it. I think somebody gets up there and outperforms Juan Soto. My hunch, my gut feeling is that it's Bryce Harper. And we see a huge Bryce Harper season. He's kind of removed from the injuries. He's officially transitioned to first base. And it's been a minute since Bryce Harper has had one of those crazy MVP level seasons. That's my pick in the NL East. My other candidates are Austin Riley, finally putting together just a really crazy good season. Obviously, I want to say Acuna, but my other brave might be Michael Harris, having the really good center field defense, and then just coupling that with, finally getting the offense going where we kind of know he can. And then my other guy would be his teammate, Francisco Lindor, right? He challenged him in WAR last year, was only 0.2 off. It's like 7.9 to 8.1. And Lindor plays great defense. He just needs to have another good offensive season. Now, last year was his career best offensive season, but that's a big time challenge in terms of WAR to a guy like Juan Soto, who, like Matt said, is pretty much a lock for 6 to 8. And that's a huge number to hit. So those are my 3 candidates. What about you, Matt?
Mine are I do think Juan Soto probably leads the National League East in WAR. I said earlier I think he's going to be between 6 and 8, and I don't know that there's any players that are going to be above 6. I think Austin Riley, Harris, a couple of those guys you mentioned could get around 6. I think the only guy, Lindor, I think is going to be around 6. He actually put up 7 this year, so he's got a chance to do it, but. I just don't know. I mean, you mentioned Harper, definitely great hitter. He plays first base defense right now. It's hard to get 7 WAR with first base defense. I mean, without having some kind of defensive value, I don't know Harper is that guy that can do it. But, Harper's never put up more than 6.6 since his 2015 season. So it's been 9 years of not putting up the level of WAR that I think Juan Soto will put up. Although, he could put up a 6.5 WAR season, and Juan Soto could have a little bit of down year. It's very possible. So I mean, I think you definitely could look at Harris, Riley, Harper, Trey Turner. You didn't mention Trey Turner. That's another guy who maybe just has a big year in him. He plays shortstop. He might have 1 year where his defensive metrics are up. He steals a lot of bases. Good hitter. He could do it. I mean, you want to hear a crazy one. What about like James Wood or somebody just breaks out for the Nationals? They got a lot of young guys who are really impressive talents. So one of those guys could just have a monster, breakout year too. But yeah, I think it's going to be Juan Soto that leads the National League East players in WAR. So, but moving on, we got 2 more here. Factor cap, league leader in saves, is not a member of the big 3 closers of Josh Hader, Ryan Helsley, and Emmanuel Clase. So somebody is going to be one of those guys, or somebody who's not.
I think the last 3 or 4, maybe 5 seasons have been led by one of those 3 guys. I would have to double check that, but those guys have been at the top of the charts. I'm going to say fact that it will not be one of those guys. Now, who is the league leader in saves going to be is a great question. This just goes to show you the volatility of the reliever position. Relievers are just super volatile right now, changing all the time, right? You're seeing, different guys get opportunities. My initial gut pick for this was it's got to be somebody who takes the closer's job and runs with it. And hasn't, necessarily closed before, but really picks it up. Obviously, I think Mason Miller is if the A's win a lot of games, Mason Miller is the guy here, but the A's have to win a lot of games, and that's not a guarantee, right? So My thought is maybe a Lucas Urseg, somebody who took over the closer's role in Kansas City last year, just got some help in Carlos Estevez, right? So he feels very confident in his role. Whether or not that they put Carlos Estevez in that closer's role to start the season is kind of another thing, though. So could be someone else, but I think we've seen enough volatility from the closer position recently that someone will ascend and join this group, and you'll see, some issues, right? I mean, Ryan Helsley's a free agent after next year. Clase is perennially available in trade because Cleveland is always looking to shake things up. And then Hader just signed the big deal, right? So these guys are probably where they are next year for sure. Helsley might move teams midseason. So it's going to come from somewhere. Maybe Joan Duran finally has the big year we're kind of waiting for. But yeah, I think it definitely won't come from one of these three, but not to say they're going to have a bad year, just that the way relievers are, somebody's just going to accrue a ton of saves for a random team.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm gonna say Cap on that one too. I do think that there's a few guys you mentioned. When I look for these relievers, I look for guys who are on teams that win a lot, but have a lot of close games, low scoring games. So, and also guys who are established closers. So I'm thinking Rizal Iglesias is one that could be that guy. He's going to close every game that the Braves have that's close. Edwin Diaz probably should be listed there. Or he's among those guys. I could see somebody like if Andres Munoz got the opportunities, that Mariners low scoring team. Maybe the Tigers are another team that's kind of one of these low scoring. They're going to play a lot of close games. But it's kind of one of those things where we don't know who their closer is going to be all year. If Jason Foley closes all season, then I could see him doing this. But it might not be him. So definitely going to be interesting. But, chances are when it comes to relievers, they're volatile. There's usually a guy that just kind of comes out of nowhere and has a big year. And, I would say that chances are it's not one of these three. But, these three guys are really good still. So we'll see. But last one, Roki Sasaki will win Rookie of the Year.
Cap.
David. Okay.
I'm a noted Dodger hater. I
was going to say, I think this is about to be a biased tyrant here. But
so to some extent, yes, right.
Somebody's about to talk about Matt Shaw for 10 minutes.
Now you listen here. I'm not even going to say Matt Shaw is the second favorite. Now I think he is the second betting favorite by everything, but I think he is. But the other guy to watch out for here, and you mentioned his team, Dylan Cruz with the Nats. That's a real sneaky option, is that Dylan Cruz comes up and just rakes with Washington all year. Obviously, Matt Shaw looks like a really good option, especially if the Cubs don't sign Alex Bregman here, which, I mean, I don't think they will, but maybe I think they should. Matt Shaw is going to have that third base role pretty much all season long. He's a guy who swipes bases. He's going to hit the ball really hard. He's going to, Matt Shaw's a really good option. Roki is obviously, we talked a lot about Roki's, I'll call them problems, but like the risks of him being good year one. He's got a lot of development to do. So I don't think the year will be particularly impressive by Roki Sasaki, but he's got the name pedigree, right? And a lot of this Rookie of the Year stuff is name pedigree. It's getting your name out there. It's being popular. And then having a really good season on top of that. And so that's how you differentiate between like four guys who had 4 WAR is, between Paul Skeens, Merrill, and Chorio, they all had 4 WAR, but Paul Skeens has the name brand recognition, right? So he gets the award, right? Who's the name brand guy? Well, that's Roki Sasaki. So these guys have to be a lot better than Roki Sasaki. I think one of them will be. There's these other guys we haven't mentioned. We don't know who's going to be up necessarily just yet, but those are the 2 obvious ones that are definitely going to start the season with their team. I like both. I think I'm leaning Cruz. I just think he may have the role on the team where if he wins the Rookie of the Year, it's because he was the hero that rose the Nats into contention for the playoffs. Matt Shaw can have a really good season, but if he has a really good season, the Cubs are going to be a really good team. And if he doesn't have a really good season, the Cubs might still be a good team, so that his impact is kind of mitigated by that. And it's kind of the same with Roki. Roki can be good or bad. Doesn't really matter. The Dodgers are going to be great. So, that's my thing is I think it's going to be Dylan Cruz that wins Rookie of the Year.
Yeah, I'm not high on Dylan Cruz. I think there's some flaws in his swing. I think he's a little bit of one of these guys that's going to swing and miss a lot at the big league level. Um, now,
Swing this before.
yeah, he had a 21% strikeout rate in the minors last year. And this is, a kid who came up and it was expected to like immediately be in the big leagues in like a year. He was thought of as major league ready. I remember when he got drafted that people were thinking of some holes in his game in that facet, and it's kind of come true a little bit in the minors. Now in AAA last year, his strikeout rate did improve, but that was only in 49 games, so it's a little bit of a smaller sample size. We'll see. I think he's got talent. I'm not trying to dog Dylan Cruz. The good thing about Dylan Cruz is he's going to steal bases. He's going to get that defense. He will get a WAR total even if he's not an elite hitter. In fact, last year he only played 31 big league games, which is about a little less than a fourth of a season, right? And he had a 0.5 WAR despite an 80 WRC plus. And that's because he stole 12 bases, had a very positive base running metric, and also had a great defensive metrics in those 31 games. So if he's able to come out and put up, a season where he puts up like a league average stat line at the plate and then has those numbers to go along with it, over a full season, 3 to 4 WAR player, he'd have a chance at Rookie of the Year. I do think that Roki Sasaki, because of the name recognition, because he's on the Dodgers and he's going to be on a big time pitcher on a contending team, I think that Roki Sasaki's got a really good chance, and I'd probably have to pick him if he's to win. But hey, I could see Dylan Cruz, and you never know. I was kind of making fun of you for Matt Shaw, but Matt Shaw is a really talented guy. He's definitely going to have a chance. And you also have the possibility of someone just coming out of nowhere too. I know that they polled the executives not long ago. I saw an article where Bubba Chandler had a lot of votes too.
Yeah.
Don't forget Jordan Lawler. That's another high end draft pick from the past that I think he's got holes in his swing. He's had some injury issues, but he's on a good team, good lineup. Jordan Lawler's kind of a guy to watch out for. Maybe he breaks out. So it's going to be interesting to see.
Andrew Painter.
Andrew Painter's another one if he's healthy.
If he's healthy, that'd be a good one. Yeah, I do want to give my boy Matt Shaw the briefest shout before we close it out here. Y'all are gonna love watching him play. He is a guy that he's not a baseball player of this era. He hits the ball the other way like 60% of the time, and we've heard, is this a problem? Right? We were a lot, and trust me, we were thinking about it the whole way through his minor league journey. It's been like, is this a problem? This guy only hits the ball the other way. Like, what's the deal with this guy? But it's because he hits the ball so dang hard the other way, right? That pitchers come in and then he turns on, he kicks, he has like a big, really high leg kick. He drops it down, doesn't kick, and just slams the ball, pulls it when he hits it, and he can hit pull side home runs. So he's got a lot of all fields power, a lot of really, like, I think every prospect list is underrating his contact tool. He strikes out less than 20% of the time every single way. Like, he's got a little bit of whiff, but he's got a couple of different swings. He's got like the A hack and the B hack. He's not going to strike out. And he's like a grinder type of baseball player that's going to steal bases, get his uniform dirty. Like, I just think this guy is going to be just like everybody's favorite baseball player because of the way I've watched him play and grow. And just like, you hear about it, right? Everybody complains, oh, they can't hit the ball the other way these days in Major League Baseball. Like, Matt Shaw is going to run like a 50% oppo rate.
Yeah.
And it's just going to be like, well, here's a guy right here who's hitting the ball the other way. I just think he's going to be really exciting. It might not be enough to win Rookie of the Year, right? I think you might be fighting uphill into Roki Sasaki. You just might.
Yeah.
But it's going to be a really fun battle. I hope that all three of these guys have really good seasons. I hope the other guys that we mentioned have really good seasons. And I hope we have some other battles here too. But this is a fun battle, and that's why I wanted to toss it out there, because Roki feels like a very high mountain to climb, but there's definitely some guys who can do it.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel that. So, one more note before we are finished with this episode. I did want to bring up that Pat Hoberg situation that happened today. Very briefly, Pat Hoberg has been fired by MLB for, I don't know if anybody remembers, but last year he got put on leave of absence because of a gambling suspicion, which nobody really knew any details about it. Well, today MLB officially fired him. Apparently, he was sharing a betting account with a friend, and there was no evidence of Hoberg betting on anything in baseball. But I believe that the friend might have bet on some baseball games, and that's just a big no-no. If you're a professional athlete, or if you're a official of a professional league or a college league, there's a lot of betting on college sports. If you're either one of those things, just don't bet. And
Mhm.
I am with you, Adam. Free Hoberg. He was the best umpire in baseball,
Yeah.
which kind of really sucks that the best umpire in baseball would be the one that this happens to. Like, why didn't this happen to Angel Hernandez like 10 years
Right.
ago?
He
I
doesn't
mean,
know
that would
he
have
doesn't know
been
what a phone is.
so good. Why did this not happen to Joe West? Like, why did Joe West have a country music addiction and
Yep.
not a gambling addiction? Like,
Why
these are
yeah.
the questions that the world will never know.
CB
But
Buckner could really
Free
use
Hoberg,
a
CB
gambling
Buckner,
problem.
we definitely need to just
Yep.
frame him. I'm gonna make a account that
Yep.
says this is CB Buckner on DraftKings next time I'm in a gambling legal state. Then I'm just gonna leave it and say it was CB
Yeah.
Buckner's. So, but yeah, this is it's unfortunate, but I thought it was worth bringing up here at the end of our show.
Yeah, you can't bet
just
on
can't do it.
games. You can't bet on you just can't. Don't even like do that. If you're in a spot like this in terms of being a sports figure,
Yeah.
whether it be, I'm thinking of the Otani thing with Ibe Mazzara, and
Yeah,
there's I think another player
just
got
don't do it.
suspended for life for betting.
Just
Don't
do it.
even if you're I was betting on foot. Don't I see like Justin Steele bets on football and stuff. Like betting on other sports is fine and legal, but you can't be associated with betting on the
Yeah.
game you're playing. But you might as well just not even.
Just don't even
get
risk
close to it.
Don't even get
Yep.
close to it. Exactly.
I know we don't. I don't know. We don't have any Major League Baseball players listening, or umpires,
Yeah.
right? If the umpires
might.
are listening, you guys are actually
Don't
doing
do
a
it.
pretty good job. But don't
Don't do it.
bet.
Don't bet.
Don't bet on sports.
All right.
Bad.
Well, I think on that note, we're going to wrap this one up. Appreciate everybody for tuning in here. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. We're on YouTube, we're on TikTok, we're on Twitter, we're on or X, we're on Instagram, we're on everything. So go follow us, check us out. Appreciate y'all listening, and we'll see you here sometime this week. We'll release another season preview. We'll see you then. If not, we'll see you on our next full episode in 2 weeks. So thanks, everybody.